and will be frank with all of you. From the very beginning, we realized the high expectation of the Lebanese public opinion toward our mission. Feeling this responsibility and following the well-established EU methodology, we have based our assessment on the fact we were able to observe across the country. Since our arrival in Beirut, 27th of March, already 7 weeks ago, by the way, the EU election observation mission members showed a high level of really professionalism. And on this stage, I have to say a big thanks to all of them, while collecting the data and meeting hundreds of interlocutors, as well as drafting all kinds of reports. Our long-term observers were deployed around Lebanon in middle of April. During the months in the field, they met hundreds of interlocutors, observers, 80 campaign events, and all the 15 major districts of the country. And I want to repeat that this preliminary statement is based on the concrete facts and direct observation, as well as on credible sources. The period after 2018 parliamentary election has been characterized by the political instability and really drastic deterioration of socio-economic conditions. Also, the preparations were affected by limited financial and human resources. The election authorities delivered the 15th May preliminary elections, and it is a great success. The election took place. It is a great success. The election took place. After the elections, the policymakers should take immediate steps forward to the necessary long-awaited reforms. I would like really thanks again all the observers who have been part of the mission, including the 66 members of the European Union diplomatic community in Lebanon who reinforced the mission close to the vote. Let me thank about 40 interlocutors, really from head of the state to the local stakeholders on the field, who give me the chance to meet during my 2 visits in Lebanon. On election day, the European Union Election Observation Mission deployed 167 observers to all 26 minor districts of the country. Overall, the mission visited 658 polling stations altogether. The atmosphere was really calm, but number of localized tensions were reported. Often, the not really well-trained polling staff could not prevent an intrusive behavior of the candidate agents, and secrecy of the vote was not always guaranteed. The Ministry of Interior and Municipalities took, for the first time, the decision to place the polling station on the ground floor of 103 schools, in order to facilitate the access of persons with disabilities. However, according to the EU observation mission observations, even if 51% of the observed polling stations were situated on the ground floor, only 43% were accessible for the person with reduced mobility. In some cases of the EU observers noted persons with reduced mobility being carried to their polling station and offered direct assistance. Regarding the out-of-country voting, the European Union Election Observation Mission noted there's a deadline for the Lebanese citizen to register to vote abroad ended on 20 of November, more than the month before the call for elections. The mission observed the out-of-country voting in 13 countries and found that there are no mere logistical problems during the vote. In addition, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs increased transparency by implementing the live transmission from the polling station abroad. The mission has noted, since yesterday, there have been reports on cases and out-of-country ballot boxes getting lost, results being cancelled, or the counting process being delayed. The mission is following up on these cases and will include the findings on the final reports. The electoral process was overshadowed by widespread practices of vote buying, clientelism, and corruption, which distort the level of playing the field that seriously affected voter choice. The legal framework constitutes an overall adequate basis for holding democratic elections. Even so, important reforms are needed to address enduring the serious legislative gaps in various fields which fell short of the relevant international communities to which Lebanon adheres. This includes campaign finance regulation, principle of equality between man and woman, equal suffrage, the right of the certain categories of citizens to vote, the right to stand, the powers of the functioning of the Supervisory Commission election, certain media legal provisions. None of 25 recommendations of the EU Electoral Observation Mission in Lebanon from 2018 was implemented. No one. The discrete magnitude deletes the significant differences in the ratio between voters and seats, which is really it's a principle of equality of vote. Also, the election law does not set out the criteria of electing a certain number of the seats of each district, which falls short of international good practice. The Ministry of Interior Municipality and the local election administration were operating the several reduced means due to the economic crisis. Due to lack of financial and human resources, election preparation started very late, with the budget allocated less than a month before the election. They were, however, mostly on time, notably due to the support on the international community to be the electoral management bodies. The European Union Election Observation Mission reported varying performances by the local election administration, which often lacked basis information on deadlines and procedures. The Supervisory Commission for Election, in charge of monitoring complaints with the campaigning, finance and media regulation, is not a full independent monitoring body. It lacked funds, qualified human resources, basic equipment, as well as adequate mandate in sanctioning power. The voter register enjoyed general confidence among the EU election observation mission interlocutors. However, the fact the voters cannot change their place, not easily, they can place the registration leads to many of them having to travel another electoral district on election day. In the context with the economic crisis, the rigid provision did not facilitate voter participation. While in general campaign was vibrant, it was also marred the instance of the intimidation of candidates, in some cases the campaign obstructions. The legal provision for the campaign finance generally is not guaranteed the transparency and accountability. The inadequate legal framework and the poor oversight, including the lack of the sanctioning mechanism, allowed for the proliferation of the vote-buying practice, affecting the level playing the field and undermining the voter's choice. Freedom of expression was expression was mostly respected during the campaign period. Also, there were cases in the mediation and number of different kind of incidents. In connection with the law, the media failed to provide equal visibility to all candidates and the candidate list. The election law did not reflect the use the specificity of the social media, and Supervisory Commission for the elections did not have the explicit mandate over violation of social media. Candidates largely used the social media to campaign, including through boosted content. Freedom of speech online was curtailed by the law by the recurring the intimidation praxis. Ladies and gentlemen, let me highlight that the neighbors and friends in Lebanon, the European Union is ready, we are ready to collaborate and support the newly elected parliament as well as the new government towards the path of the urgently needed reforms. The mission will remain in the country until the end of this electoral process, and will be following the end of the tabulation as well as the electoral disputes process. Within the next few weeks, the representation of the Electoral Observation Mission and myself as a chief observer will come back to Lebanon to present the final reporting containing the recommendation the possible future electoral reforms. We really do hope that it will be a great fundament, this final report, for the future dialogue between European Union and Lebanon to work together to improve the future electoral process in Lebanon. Ladies and gentlemen, many thanks.
Thank you very much. Now the word is for Brando Benifei, the head of the European Parliament delegation.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thanks to our chief observer for the great cooperation, and to all the mission of the EU for the great work together that we did as part of this mission as a delegation of the European Parliament. My name is Brando Benifei, member of the European Parliament from Italy. It's my pleasure to have this opportunity to speak on behalf of a delegation of 7 members of the European Parliament, coming from 6 different member states and 6 different political groups. The European Union has observed all elections in Lebanon since 2005. This demonstrates our commitment to this country and its people. The European Parliament, the only directly elected body of the EU, representing 447 million European citizens, also followed these elections with us. During our stay in the country, we met with national authorities, representatives of several political parties, the Supervisory Committee of Elections, civil society organizations and academics. And of course, we observed the conduct of the elections on the field. First of all, I want to say that we fully subscribe the conclusions of the European Election Observation Mission. We fully endorse the findings presented today by colleague and friend Chief Observer Georgi Olveni. We are glad that in spite of everything, the elections took place at the natural end of the previous parliamentary term. As we know, however, democracy goes beyond elections, and we will say about that. But this is already an achievement, that the elections actually took place. The polls were held in a context, we have to remember, that the World Bank described as one of the most severe crises recorded since decades, even centuries. Over the last few years, Lebanon has faced a financial collapse, a pandemic, one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history, a huge social-economic crisis, widespread corruption, large-scale protests, and a political stalemate. Moreover, the Russian war against Ukraine has precipitated Lebanon's food security. In just 2.5 years, the economic crisis caused the poverty rate to rise from 30% to around 70–80% based on the statistics we have. In his April 2022 report, the UN Human Rights Council Special Rapporteur stated, and I quote, that the Lebanese state, including its central bank, is responsible for human rights violations, including unnecessary immiseration of the population that have resulted in this man-made crisis. So this institutional breakdown and dysfunctioning of the Lebanese institutions has given the impression that sometimes the state is not always in charge as it should. This is united with corruption that permeates all levels of society. Notwithstanding the very nature of the Lebanese consensual democracy, it should be possible for reforms to be carried out. The constant practice of veto wielding, which leads to an ineffective parliament unable to take all decisions needed, should be addressed, including also in this consideration that the lack of independence of the judiciary and the prosecution of high-profile criminal cases rarely delivering results, as it has been particularly evident in the case of the investigation of the Beirut blast, gives us concern and has an influence on the overall context where the elections took place. In some of our meetings, the issue of macroeconomic structural reform was described as the best way to address some of these challenges. In general, we noted a quite general understanding that the IMF is the best available option to get support from the international community, provided the prior conditions of the staff-level agreement are swiftly implemented. The highest authorities of the state told us clearly that external influence and a huge injection of foreign funds during the campaign has led to widespread practices of vote buying that was already, as was already mentioned. They added that this phenomenon distorted the level playing field during the election campaign, in particular with the access to the media, which obviously affects the voter's choice. Many political actors shared with us the preoccupation concerning the integrity of the votes coming from the out-of-country voting. On election day, we split in 3 teams, and we covered Batroun, Byblos, Chouf, Saida, Mount Lebanon, and the southern suburbs of Beirut. We would like to express our admiration of all the voters from Lebanon in the way they have acted with patience and determination in peacefully exercising their democratic rights, often with long queues. On the other hand, we need to stress that we witnessed many shortcomings. Due to the lack of resources, including those of the Supervisory Commission for Elections, many polling staff members demonstrated a clear lack of training, which had a negative impact on the respect of the electoral law provisions, for example, in securing the secrecy of the vote. Our delegation equally observed the presence of more party agents than those foreseen by the law within and around the polling stations. Often this led to confusion and risk creating a pressuring atmosphere. However, we would like to commend the positive presence of the army and security services, which contributed to a relatively peaceful conduct of the elections and giving a sense of control and good governance of the process. We deplore that the exercise of the right to vote of citizens with disabilities was not guaranteed in the vast majority of the polling stations we observed. The burdensome transfer of the voter registration location from their central village to the residence place, the socio-economic crisis, and the failure to establish the mega centers of voting might have had an impact on the voter participation rate. Finally, we deplore that none of the EU-EOM recommendations following the 2018 elections were implemented, in particular the one regarding the need for strengthening the Supervisory Commission for Elections, especially in dealing with the financing of the campaign and the media regulation, and the participation of women in the political life of the country, which is still not sufficient. According to 2020 World Economic Forum Gender Gap Report, Lebanon has one of the highest overall gender gaps in the world, ranking 145 among 153 countries. We consider that 51% of the population should be represented in larger number in the political life of the country. Election day is now behind us, but we are following closely the tabulation and the possible disputes for the attribution of seats. The Lebanese people have elected a new parliament in spite of the shortcomings we have witnessed, and this is a good news. We expect the new parliament to play its role as a responsible and constructive actor to get Lebanon out of its crisis. Despite the rigid electoral systems, these elections demonstrated the feasibility of political pluralism and alternance. This could be a sign that the Lebanese people want to turn the page of their history and proceed in a new phase. Finally, I would like to strongly urge all political forces, all, to focus on the interests of the Lebanese people as opposed to their own short-term political interests. The people of Lebanon deserve a good future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll take some questions now, just for journalists, okay? Please, there should be a microphone. Is there anybody? I see there is my assistant here to take the names, and there is a microphone available. I don't know if there is any question here. Here. And please, if there are other, just tell my assistant to, please, whenever you ask a question, just before, if you can tell your name and the medium you represent. Thank you.
Hi, it's Shona Murray from Euronews. This is for whoever wants to take the question. Just a couple of things. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on some of the reports around intimidation and violence in polling centres, and also some of the preparations and transparency around the election as well, please?
Sorry, I don't see you.
I'm here.
There.
Here.
Oh, sorry. So thanks a lot. I would immediately pass the word to our Deputy Chief Observer, Mr. Domanski.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Shona. I mean, concerning the incidents on the election day, I mean, first of all, let me tell you, and I think you will find relevant information regarding the incidents which took place prior to the election day in some regions of Lebanon. These cases of intimidation were mostly reported to our observers from credible sources, including by the victims who suffered, who were objects of these intimidations. The mission regrets that these cases have taken place. Nevertheless, we must also admit that these were isolated, rather localized incidents which did not distort the results of this electoral process. As far as the election day is concerned, we have also noticed some, I would rather say, tensions than incidents. There have been some incidents. As the Chief Observer mentioned, the role of party agents or list agents were sometimes, I would say, disproportionate, and those who were in the polling stations were sometimes, to a certain extent, I would say, overwhelmed, if not intimidated by this party or list agents. However, these instances were, again, rather limited and localized. It also had a certain impact on the secrecy of vote. Thank you.
Sorry, just to follow up. What do you think, or do you think there was a distortion of the election in total? I mean, because there's a list of, areas of concern. So do you think the election preliminary was distorted in terms of transparency and fairness, I guess?
Well, I think that we should talk about four categories of irregularities. On the one hand, the vote buying and clientelistic practices, clientelism. On the other hand, the intimidation and campaigns obstruction. So as far as the intimidation prior to the election day, as well as on the election day, did not, as I have just mentioned, have an impact, serious impact on the election's result. Same for the obstruction of the campaign events. The vote buying and clientelism in general, these clientelistic practices, which are systemic and long-term in this country, in our opinion, did affect, did distort the electoral process and did affect the free voters' choice. Thanks.
And next. Thank you.
Abby Sewell-Lorient today. With regards to the vote buying, Mr. Benefi had mentioned there was an influx of foreign funds to some of the campaigns. Can you elaborate on that, or where those funds were coming from?
Well, we have seen publicly that were affirmations, declarations of various political actors of different sources of funding coming from abroad. I don't think that it's important for me to pinpoint one or other, because there are different sources on the ground in Lebanon, in the political sphere, that say that every day, no? So I don't need to explain to you. But it's clear, to be frank, that this is a very felt issue from all sides of political world of Lebanon, and for sure it's important to strengthen, as we said, and we already said in 2008 mission, 2018, sorry, mission, that we strengthen the instruments to control and check financial fluxes. I'm sure that with the reforms that are in place, there will be also more transparency on the financial flows, which I think it's a basic issue for citizens to know how and who is influencing the politics of a country and with which means. So I'm sure that, as I mentioned, and we mentioned the issue of IMF and the reforms that might be discussed also with the international interlocutors, I'm sure that more transparency on these aspects and more possible control from the authorities, from the state authorities, will be very important.
Thank you. Next question. Maybe here, John.
Thank you so much. Wasim Cornet for France 24. I have two questions. First of all, have you been able to pinpoint any specific seats or electoral districts where these allegations of vote buying, corruption have been able to influence voters more or less reflect the will of the voters? And second question, we've seen pictures online of ballot boxes from voters abroad, notably France and Qatar, that were damaged. The Interior Minister says that they were just damaged on the flight to Beirut, but have you been able to confirm whether this is just a bumpy ride or more of a malicious act? Thank you very much.
Okay, many thanks. First, back to the vote buying. Yeah, this everybody knows in this country. You know, I have really spent weeks here and with all together, and everybody is talking about to really recognize the concrete cases. Of course, this practical term is possible. Yeah, but everybody knows it about it. Everybody talk about himself, you know, and everybody is involved indirectly or indirectly in this situation, this praxis. Of course, the vote buying is a huge challenge concerning the visibility. That's it. Thank you. And I pass the word to Mr. Domanski, please.
Thank you. So first on
the question. Yeah.
Thank you. First, as far as the out-of-country voting, let me start perhaps underlying that our observers, short-term observers, had an opportunity to observe the out-of-country vote in 13 European countries on the 8th of May. They took note of the seals, and they were comparing these seals looking at the boxes and at the seals, comparing them with those which they were observing in Europe. As far as the process is, the process of tabulation of out-of-country voting is concerned, so far what we noted is that 4 polling stations abroad were cancelled because the boxes were lost. 1 polling station was cancelled because the material that arrived was incomplete. 2 polling stations were not cancelled despite the material being incomplete. And no LTO team, long-term observers team, has observed or heard of any evidence of tampered out-of-country voting pouches. We keep observing this tabulation process and we will be able to provide the Lebanese public opinion with more information on this at the later stage. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Suniva. I work for The National. Regarding the financing of elections, you mentioned that this year the amount of money available was much lower than in 2018, I think around 16 million, and in 2019 over 50 million. How do you explain this difference? If you think that the money was enough for this year, how do you explain that there was so much more money in 2018, and where did that money go? Thanks.
Okay, this is a real question to our fantastic analyst, Nadine Haas. Please, Nadine, the floor is yours. Yeah?
I mean, we have taken note that the budget for these elections was 3 times less than for the 2018 elections. And we also took note that it was approved and signed by the president only 1 month before the election started. What we can say is that it's the amount of financial resources available and also delayed approval of those funds delayed the preparations of the elections. Nevertheless, in the end, the electoral preparations were finalized and the elections took place. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I would like to just add one point on this, because we noticed in some election polling stations the lack of the further assistance to up to 4. We only have seen 2. And these couples, I think, with the strong presence of party people there, so in this reduced funding has determined an increased presence of the party political people, an increased number of representatives that, as we explained, created in some cases, not all that observed, in some cases there was not this atmosphere, but in some places a kind of influencing, pressuring atmosphere, because exactly the staff was maybe less trained, and also it was less than expected, and there were a lot of people from the parties. This was not in all cases, but in a significant number of instances, and this tells us a bit about the lack of resources compared to the previous election.
Thank you very much. No questions at all? Okay, if not, I thank you, all the people who came. And at the exit, you will find the preliminary statement, both in Arabic and in English, and also the press release in both languages. We'll probably see you again in a few weeks, in a couple of months, for the presentation of the final report. Thank you very much again.
ستوب للستريمينج هلا رح اعمل ستوب